They used my late grandfather's money, the inheritance meant to be split, to fund a luxury ski trip without telling me when I asked. Mom wrote, "We didn't think you'd use your share anyway." I messaged, "A surprise awaits you." When they came back, their faces went pale. I found out my parents spent my grandfather's money on a ski trip because my cousin tagged my mom in a photo. That's it. No dramatic confession. No guilty phone call. Just a bright blue sky, white slopes in Aspen, and my mother in a brand new ski suit I'd never seen before. The caption said, "Family getaway. Grandpa would have wanted us to celebrate life." I stared at that sentence for a long time. My grandfather, Arthur Bennett, died 3 months ago. He wasn't flashy, but he was careful. The kind of man who reused envelopes and kept every receipt in a shoebox. He left behind a modest inheritance. Nothing life-changing, but enough to matter. The will was simple. His savings were to be split evenly between Mom, Dad, and me. We'd all sat at the lawyer's office together when it was read. Equal shares. Clear as day. Or so I thought. I hadn't received anything yet, but I assumed it was paperwork delays. I work 2 jobs. I'm not exactly glued to my bank account every hour. My parents handle most of the family finances. I trusted them. Or I did. When I saw the photo, I zoomed in on the background. My dad was holding a pair of skis that still had the store sticker on them. My mom had written in the comments that they finally decided to splurge. Splurge. What? I called her that night. She didn't pick up. I texted, "Did Grandpa's estate get finalized?" She replied almost immediately, "Yes, weeks ago." I stared at the message. "Weeks ago?" I asked. "And my share?" 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then appeared again. Finally she wrote, "We didn't think you'd use your share anyway." That was it. No explanation. No apology. I read it out loud to myself to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding. "We didn't think you'd use your share anyway." I called my dad next. Straight to voicemail. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying memories of Grandpa teaching me how to balance a checkbook at his kitchen table. He used to say, "Never let anyone handle your money without your eyes on it." Apparently I forgot that lesson. The next morning I drove to their house unannounced. Their driveway was empty. A neighbor watering her lawn told me they'd left for Colorado 2 days earlier. 2 days. So the estate had been finalized weeks ago. They'd transferred the money. Booked a luxury ski resort. Packed. Flown out. And at no point did they think to mention it to me. I went back to my car and just sat there. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the family group chat. My mom had posted another picture. This one was of a massive chalet with floor-to-ceiling windows. Snow piled up around it like something out of a magazine. Caption, "Worth every penny." That's when something inside me settled. Not exploded. Not shattered. Settled. I opened our private chat and typed 4 words. "Surprise awaits you." She read it within a minute. No response. Good. Because by the time they came back from that mountain, they were going to understand exactly what my share was worth. And it wasn't just money. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I drove straight to the one person my parents forgot about. Mr. Halpern. He was Grandpa's attorney for almost 20 years. The same man who read the will in that quiet office with the ticking clock and the leather chairs that smelled like dust. When I walked in without an appointment, the receptionist looked confused, but Mr. Halpern stepped out of his office and recognized me immediately. He said he was sorry for my loss again and asked what I needed. I asked one question. Was the inheritance already distributed? He looked at his computer, then at me. He said yes, it was disbursed 2.5 weeks ago. To all 3 beneficiaries? He paused. Then he said no. He turned the monitor slightly so I could see. The funds had been transferred into a single account listed under my father's name. There was a signed document authorizing him to receive and manage distribution on behalf of all parties. My signature was on it. Except it wasn't. It looked close. Same looping N. Same last name. But the line was too stiff. The spacing wrong. I've signed my name thousands of times. I knew instantly that wasn't mine. I asked Mr. Halpern if he had witnessed it. He said the document was delivered electronically with identity verification. It came from my email. My stomach dropped. I pulled out my phone and checked. 2 weeks ago, there was an email from the law office asking me to confirm digital authorization. I never saw it. It was marked as read. Not by me. I don't share passwords. I don't leave my laptop around. But there was one place I had logged in recently. My parents' house. 3 weeks ago I used their desktop to print tax documents. I'd logged into my email. I remember because their printer jammed twice. I asked Mr. Halpern to forward me the metadata from the signed document. He looked hesitant but agreed after I explained what I suspected. The IP address attached to the signature matched my parents' home internet provider. I just sat there staring at the numbers. This wasn't a misunderstanding. They didn't think I wouldn't use it. They forged my consent. Mr. Halpern said if there's a dispute this could become serious. Fraud serious. I nodded. I didn't threaten anything. I didn't raise my voice. I asked for certified copies of everything and thanked him for his time. On the drive home my mom finally replied to my message. What surprise. I didn't answer. Instead I stopped at the county records office. My grandfather owned something most people forgot about. A small aging commercial property on the edge of town. An old 2-story brick building he rented out to a print shop for years. In the will it wasn't mentioned as part of the shared savings. Because it wasn't part of the savings. It was in a separate clause. I hadn't thought about it during the reading. I was too focused on the bank accounts. But I remembered Grandpa once telling me casually that the building would skip a generation. At the time I thought he meant someday. When I requested the property file, the clerk printed the deed transfer. It had already been processed. Sole ownership. Transferred to Nora Bennett. Me. 2 weeks ago. The same day they transferred the money to themselves. I stood there holding the paper while my phone buzzed again. My mom sent another photo. This time it was of champagne glasses on a balcony overlooking snow-covered mountains. The caption read, "We deserve this." I looked down at the deed in my hand and realized something they clearly hadn't. They thought they'd taken everything. They hadn't even looked. And that building? It was about to become very important. I hadn't stepped inside the building in years. It sat on the corner of Maple and 8th, wedged between a closed diner and a hardware store that looked older than my grandfather. The print shop tenant had moved out last year according to the records clerk. No one had renewed the lease. The windows were dusty but intact. The brick exterior needed work but it wasn't falling apart. It was forgotten, not ruined. I unlocked the front door with the spare key Grandpa once gave me just in case. I never returned it. Inside the air smelled like paper and old wood. The presses were gone but metal shelving still lined the walls. Toward the back there was a narrow staircase leading upstairs. I climbed it slowly. The second floor wasn't a shop. It was an apartment. I had completely forgotten about it. 2 bedrooms. A small kitchen. Tall windows overlooking the street. It wasn't modern, but it had solid hardwood floors and thick walls. Someone could live here comfortably with a little work. And then I noticed the envelopes. A stack of them sat on the kitchen counter, all addressed to Arthur Bennett. Some unopened. Most stamped within the last 6 months. Property tax notices. A redevelopment proposal. And a letter from a real estate investment firm in Chicago. I opened that one first. They were offering to purchase the property for redevelopment. Mixed-use retail and residential. The number written in bold at the bottom made me sit down. It was nearly 4 times the value of Grandpa's entire savings account. I checked the date. 3 weeks ago. The same week my parents rushed to finalize the estate. They knew. There was no way they didn't. I went through the tax notice next. It stated that a zoning review had recently approved commercial expansion for that entire block. Property values in the area were projected to surge within the year. My hands were steady. My breathing wasn't. This wasn't about a ski trip. This was about timing. They'd taken the liquid cash. The easy money. The part that could be transferred quietly. But they hadn't bothered to check the rest of the will carefully. They assumed the old building was a burden. They assumed wrong. My phone buzzed again. A text from Dad this time. Your message sounded strange. Everything okay? I typed back. Everything's perfect. That afternoon I called the investment firm. I didn't commit to anything. I asked questions. I listened. The man on the phone sounded eager. He said they had been trying to reach my grandfather for months before learning he had passed. He mentioned that several properties on the block were already under contract, including the diner next door, and the hardware store, which meant my building was the missing piece. He asked if I'd consider meeting in person when I was ready. I told him I would. That night, my parents posted a final set of photos before flying home. Ski lifts, fireplaces, smiling selfies with captions about making memories. I responded in the family group chat for the first time since this started. Hope you had an amazing trip. We'll talk when you get back. I've made some decisions too. My mom replied with a heart emoji. They had no idea that by the time their plane touched down, the balance of power in this family had shifted completely. And I wasn't planning to argue. I was planning to wait. They came back on a Sunday night. I didn't go to the airport. I didn't call. I waited until Monday morning and drove to their house before work, just like any normal visit. Their SUV was in the driveway, still dusted with airport grime. I rang the doorbell. Mom opened it wearing one of those Aspen sweaters she'd probably paid too much for. She looked rested. Dad appeared behind her with a coffee mug that said Mountain Mode. Mom said they brought me something from Colorado. I said we should sit down first. We moved to the kitchen table. Same place Grandpa used to sit when he visited. The room felt smaller than I remembered. I placed a folder in front of them. Dad asked what this was. I said paperwork. He opened it. On top was the certified copy of the forged authorization with my fake signature. Beneath it, the metadata showing the IP address. Beneath that, a printed screenshot of my email login history from their home network. Neither of them spoke. Mom looked at Dad. Dad looked at the papers again like they might rearrange themselves into something harmless. I said I met with Mr. Halpern. Dad finally said this wasn't necessary. I asked what part wasn't necessary. The forgery or the ski trip. Mom said they were going to tell me. I asked when. Silence. Then Dad tried a different angle. He said they thought it would be easier to manage the money in one place. That I've always been independent. That I probably would have just let it sit in savings anyway. I asked if that explanation would hold up in court. That landed. Mom said we didn't need to talk about courts. I told them I agreed. We didn't. Because I wasn't there about the money anymore. I took another document out of the folder and slid it across the table. The deed to the building on Maple and 8th. Mom frowned like she didn't recognize it. Dad did. I could see it. I said Grandpa transferred it solely to me. Dad said that old place wasn't worth much. It needs repairs. Taxes. Maintenance. I told him about the redevelopment approval. The investment firm. The offer. For the first time both of them looked confused. I said the initial offer was almost 4 times the value of the estate savings. Mom actually laughed a little like she didn't believe me. So I handed over the printed proposal. Dad read the number twice. That's when their faces changed. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse them again. I just explained calmly that the building is positioned in the center of a redevelopment block. Without it, the project stalls. With it, they move forward immediately. Mom asked what that had to do with them. I said everything. Because I wasn't planning to sell. At least not yet. Instead, I told them I had already met with a commercial leasing consultant. If I renovated the second-floor apartment and leased the ground floor to a specialty retail tenant, the long-term rental income would exceed the sale offer within a few years. Dad said that would take capital. I said I know. Then I let the sentence sit there. Mom understood first. She asked what I was implying. I said I wasn't implying anything. I was presenting options. Option 1. I file a formal fraud complaint regarding the forged authorization. Mr. Halpern already documented everything. The bank would investigate. Law enforcement might get involved. Option 2. We treat this as a family mistake. They immediately return my full share of the savings plus any penalties or fees associated with the unauthorized transfer. In return, I don't escalate. Dad asked if I was threatening them. I said no. I was protecting myself. The room felt very quiet. Then Dad said something I didn't expect. He said they couldn't return it. Asked why. Mom looked down at the table. Dad said the ski trip wasn't the only expense. Apparently, they'd used a large portion of the inheritance as a down payment. On a pre-construction condo in Colorado. Non-refundable. They'd signed the contract 2 days after transferring the money. My stomach tightened, but not from shock. From clarity. They hadn't just taken my share for a vacation. They'd invested it. And now they were overextended. Dad said they assumed I'd never challenge it. That's when I told them the surprise wasn't a lawsuit. It was leverage. And they still hadn't realized the most important part. Because I hadn't told them yet what the investment firm offered me that morning. The investment firm called me at 8 a.m., right before I drove to my parents' house. They said their board had reviewed the block again over the weekend. Timelines had shifted. Funding windows were tightening. If I was willing to sign within 30 days, they were prepared to increase the offer significantly. I didn't tell my parents the updated number right away. I wanted them to understand the situation first. Now, sitting at their kitchen table, I took out the final page from my folder and placed it in front of them. Dad adjusted his glasses. Mom leaned closer. The new offer was nearly 6 times Grandpa's entire savings account. The condo down payment they'd made in Colorado suddenly looked microscopic. Dad asked if it was real. I said yes. I verified it. I had a meeting scheduled for Thursday. Mom asked what I planned to do. I told them the truth. I wasn't sure. Because selling meant immediate freedom. No debts. No juggling 2 jobs. No asking anyone for anything ever again. But holding meant control. Long-term income. Stability. And something else. It meant they would need me. Dad said we could all benefit if we handled this together. I asked how. He said if I sold, maybe we could use part of the proceeds to secure financing for their condo balance. Avoid penalties. Make it a shared investment opportunity. There was. They still saw my assets as communal. Mom said families help each other. I asked if that applied before or after forging signatures. Silence again. Then something unexpected happened. Dad stood up, walked to the counter, and came back with a folder I'd never seen before. He placed it in front of me. Inside were renovation sketches. Architectural plans. For the building on Maple and 8th. My building. The drawings were dated 4 months ago. Before Grandpa passed. Dad said he and Grandpa had been talking about redeveloping it together. Turning the 2nd floor into modern apartments. Keeping the ground floor commercial. Grandpa wanted it to stay in the family. That's why he left it directly to me. Dad said Grandpa believed I was the only one who wouldn't sell immediately. I flipped through the pages slowly. The plans were detailed. Cost breakdowns. Contractor notes. Even a drafted loan proposal. Dad said after Grandpa died, everything felt chaotic. The inheritance money looked like an easy way to secure something tangible. A condo in Colorado. A future asset. Something they could control. He admitted they panicked. Mom said they thought I wouldn't care about the cash as much as they did. That part hurt more than the forgery. I closed the folder. Then I told them the part I'd been holding back. The investment firm didn't just want to buy my building. They wanted a long-term anchor tenant agreement signed before construction began. And they'd asked if I'd consider joining their local advisory board as a minority stakeholder if I retained partial ownership instead of selling outright. Dad blinked. Mom asked what that meant. It meant I wouldn't just be selling property. I'd be stepping into development. Into leverage that went beyond 1 block. Into something that could define the next 20 years of my life. And here's the twist neither of them saw coming. I said I wasn't here to demand repayment. I was here to offer them a contract. I slid a new document across the table. Dad picked it up slowly. It wasn't a threat. It was a partnership agreement. And the terms were not what they expected. The contract was simple. If they wanted to keep their Colorado condo and avoid legal consequences, they would transfer full ownership of it to me once construction was completed. Not as a gift. Not as a family favor. As restitution. In exchange, I would formally decline to pursue fraud charges and structure the building redevelopment as a separate entity under my sole control. They would have no claim to it. No input. No access. Dad read the first page twice. Mom asked if I was serious. I said yes. They had used my inheritance to secure a pre-construction asset. Fine. That asset would now become mine. Clean transfer. No future arguments. No emotional debts. Dad said the condo was supposed to be their retirement place. I said the building was supposed to be Grandpa's legacy. Nobody raised their voice. Nobody stormed out. It was quiet in a way that felt final. After 10 minutes, Dad asked for a pen. Mom didn't stop him. They signed. I left their house with a copy of the agreement and something else I didn't expect to feel. Relief. Not because I won. Because I understood something clearly for the first time. Revenge would have been reporting them. Power was giving them a choice and letting them live with it. 3 months later, the investment firm finalized a joint development deal. I retained equity in the project. The building is being renovated instead of demolished. My name is on the ownership documents. The Colorado condo finishes construction next spring. It will also be in my name. My parents still went on their ski trip. They just ended up funding my future instead of theirs. Future instead of theirs. Future instead of theirs.